It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Welcome to County-Wide. I'm Paul David. Very good to have you in studio with us today. Today we are going to talk about the BEAR team, the Burned Area Emergency Response Team. And these are the folks that go in during wildfires and determine what needs to be rehabilitated immediately to protect life and property and the forest itself. And with us today is Dave Moore. Dave is the forest soil scientist for the BEAR team, and he's with the Prescott National Forest. Welcome to studio, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Before we get into the BEAR team, you got to tell me what a soil scientist is, and how did you pick that field?
Well, it's a dirt doctor.
It's a dirt doctor, right on. Okay.
Well, you know, originally I knew I wanted to get into environmental resources, and I went to Arizona State University, and it just kind of came to me. You know, I worked for the state, for the Arizona Department of Transportation, and because I had an environmental degree, they asked me to do soil samples, and I'm like, okay, I'll do some soil samples for you to look at the de-icing agents' impacts upon the soils. Okay. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And I came to the forest originally as a range conservationist. But I had a strong soils background, so I gradually moved into the soils arena. And you have been with the Prescott National Forest for quite some time now. Oh, yes, since 1999. 1999, so. Okay. With that, I'm so glad you're here in studio today because we've had, after the Dose fire finished and it was put out and it was declared contained, I noticed that then the press releases started to come out that the BEAR team was going in. And I think I mostly became familiar with the BEAR team back during the I want to say the Brins fire. I had not heard of the BEAR teams prior to that, but the Brins fire in Sedona was when I first noticed that came in, and I believe we had a show, we did a show at that time on it. But kind of tell me what the BEAR team is, the Burned Area Emergency Response Team. At what point in time during a wildfire are you guys called in? So that's an excellent question. You know we have emergency conditions when you have a wildfire come through. Obviously, you know, it's a dangerous situation. But after the wildfire is done, there's still emergency situations there. You removed a lot of your protective cover, and you have a lot of watershed response from flooding, accelerated soil loss. So that's what the BEAR team does. After a wildfire, and our policy from the Forest Service is when we reach 500 acres, we assemble a BEAR team. Okay. How many members make up a team? Well, it depends. You know, if it's a very complex fire, it can be an array of, you've got 25, 30 people. Okay. Also, we have multiple partners. You know, we have the county emergency services. We have the flood control services. We have our sister agency, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. Okay. So it just depends on the complexity of the fire. Okay. And then you said 500 acres. Why is 500 acres kind of the key number? You know, it used to be 300 acres. We moved it up to 500 acres. Again, that's why we changed the name from, it used to be Burn Area Emergency Rehabilitation. Now it's just response. We bring in the team and we look, hey, is there some impacts out there? And when you start getting to 500 acres, you start burning 500 acres within a watershed that drains to a certain point, you can start having impacts upon the watershed response in that area. Now, are all the BEAR team members that you work with, are they all part of the Prescott National Forest, or are these people that come from all over the country with different specialties? I'm going to answer yes to both those questions. Okay. So we have a core team on the Prescott National Forest, but we do throughout the nation. We share resources across the nation. It depends on the complexity of your fire, what kind of skills we need. So it just depends. But normally we try to establish everything within the forest. Now, you actually sent out, or Debbie Manili sent it out, and it said to call you for more information, but you actually sent out the Burned Area Emergency Response for the Dose fire. So that's correct. Okay, so you went into the Dose fire, and I'm speculating here, but I imagine while the fire was still burning and it reached that acreage that we're talking about, 500 acres, you guys started looking at that already saying, okay, we've got these homes down below. This fire burnt above residential areas. So
Is that a key to bringing you in? I mean, let's say there's a wildfire that burns out in the middle of nowhere. There's no homes, there's no archaeological sites, because you also have to protect those as well. Would a bear team come into a wildfire that is, let's say it's really burning in the middle of nowhere? Would you still go in for something like that, or is it just when there's
Oh,
property?
absolutely.
Okay.
You know, we're not just looking at, there are we're concerned about health and safety of the public, of course. You know, that's our number one thing. And then we're concerned about property as well. But we are concerned about critical natural resources, like you mentioned, heritage resources. There can be some sensitive areas across the landscape that we really want to protect as an agency. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't really matter where the location of the fire is. We'll assemble a team to go assess the situation, see what the risks are from the post-fire impact.
So if it's a small wildfire, no. But if it's a big one, and if it's burning in the middle of nowhere, you guys still go out there and take a look at it and just to see, okay, what we need to do.
Now, there could actually be a 100-acre wildfire. But we'll look at it. We just won't go through. It might just be myself or a couple people, and we try to get a couple condition parameters of the fire and say, hey, this is a concern. But it could be a 50-acre fire, but it's a small area and it's draining into the back of a preschool or something. That is, an issue. So we actually do the formal bear team when it reaches 500 acres.
Okay, let's start talking about the Dose fire, because I know we've got that report in hand, and you mentioned just before the show started that you aren't really responsible for the Yarnell Hill fire because that was on state land.
That's correct.
Although you did help with looking at the Yarnell Hill fire. Talk to me about the Dose fire. What were some of the interesting challenges there in the terrain?
Well, the Dose fire, as everybody knows, that's within, the majority of that fire is within the Granite Mountain Wilderness. And it's very steep country. The fire, it had very intense fire conditions. And the location of that, especially on the north side where we're doing the treatments, and we've got some concerns there because it drains into a community. And because of the makeup of the soil, there's some perennial riparian ecosystems downstream where we have some sensitive species.
Okay.
And we want to try to maintain the integrity and the function of those natural resource systems.
When the wildfire came through, what did it do to that land there that was no concern to us whatsoever until that blaze went through?
Well, so that's what happens. We have a lot of vegetation cover that facilitates infiltration into the soil. It helps stabilize the soils. And that, if you don't infiltrate that water into the soil, it's going to run off the soil. And then that creates where you have your flooding, your post-fire flooding impacts. So that's what we try to assess. And we look at burn severity. And that's a little different than what the fire folks look at. They look at fire behavior. So they're looking at, hey, how hot is this fire? We are too. But we're saying, hey, how is that impacting the soils of this area? And then what proportion of this watershed is it impacting, which will impact the downstream resources.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about that. We have to take a break, okay?
Okay.
Dave Moore with the Prescott National Forest is in studio today. He is a forest soil scientist with the Burned Area Emergency Response Team. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Having a fire escape plan is very important to keep your family safe and together in the event of a fire. When you awake to the sound of a smoke detector and smoke in your room, don't stand straight up. Carefully roll off your bed and stay low under the smoke. If your door is shut, feel the door with the back of your hand. Slowly open the door if no heat is felt. Always stay low until you get to the outside of your home. Always have 2 ways out of your house and a specified meeting place somewhere outside your home. Home escape plans should be drawn up and rehearsed on a regular basis. This could be the difference between life and death if caught in a fire.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your Northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Move over, AZ. Arizona's Move Over law requires you to move over or slow down when you drive past any vehicle pulled over with flashing lights. Any vehicle means emergency responders, roadside assistance, law enforcement, highway crews, even stranded motorists. Ignore the law and you could pay a fine. Remember, every vehicle, every time. Move over, AZ.
Sponsored by ADOT in partnership with the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Welcome back to Countywide. It is very good to have you in studio with us today. Dave Moore with the Prescott National Forest and the Bear Team, Burned Area Emergency Response Team, is here. We're talking about the Dose fire. The Yarnell Hill fire you guys did help with, but I think we're going to focus mostly on the Dose fire.
That's correct.
Okay. Burn severity. We talked about that just before the break, and you mentioned you kind of go in and look at burn severity throughout the burn area. How do you determine which areas were burned more than others? Because we've heard that we had a guest in one time that talked about how when it burns, sometimes the soil almost turns into like glass. Water hits it, it just rolls right off.
That's correct.
So kind of how do you determine severity?
That's what we look. You know, we look at how much of that ground cover did it burn off. And then there's some other parameters that we look at, is how is it impacting that infiltration upon the soil. So we look at, they call it water repellency. So what actually happens is when you burn that organic matter, that biomass, that vegetation, it actually, they call it volatilize. It evaporates all those organic materials. But that's heavier than the air, so it actually sinks and it infiltrates through the soil. And as that does that, it coats all the soil particles. Okay. So it's like a wax job.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what we do is that's literally what we do is we bring some water and we test for the hydrophobicity. And then we have different classes of that. We have a low, moderate, and high. And then from that, we look at, hey, how much of the vegetation has it consumed as well? Mm-hmm. And once we get calibrated on that, we can visually map the different burn severity classes. So we have a high, moderate, and low burn severity class. And usually what we're shooting for when we do treatment or concern is the high and moderate burn severity class. Although you can still have some impacts from the low, but this is a quick, rapid assessment. You got to realize these fires usually happen mid-June. Mm-hmm. We have monsoons come in July.
They're always right on the heels of these wildfires.
That's correct.
Like. Yeah.
So we have to be pretty quick and responsive on this.
And you are. I'm really amazed by that because I think the first treatment was actually being conducted just as the monsoon season started.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And how do you? Okay, this is the Granite Mountain Wilderness, and I'm picturing Granite Mountain Wilderness as these big, smooth granite boulders that we've got all over Prescott. They're just gorgeous. And then, how do you go in there on foot? Obviously, you have maps of the burn area. Do you go on foot? Do you go by helicopter? And how do you determine, okay, this area was burned severely and these homes are down here? How do you decide which areas need to be done first? Well,
we've got a number of tools. Technology's really assisted us quite a bit. So we do burned area reflectancy class, and that's called the BARC map. So we use that as a tool. It's satellite imagery. We have a pre-fire, we have a post-fire picture, and it takes the reflectancy and the degree of reflectancy, and it shows us the difference of what was burned. Okay. But that's not always 100%, especially when you start getting rock outcrops like we have at the Granite Mountain Wilderness. So then the team goes and we have to field verify that. But by using that BARC map, that kind of helps us hone in on the areas that we need to go into. There's enough data layer out there, and we have a lot of soils layers. We have a lot of hydrologic layers, data, so that we can go and we really know where to focus to assess the fire.
And I imagine most of them are these big washes that lead down into these areas.
Well, yes.
These communities.
Yes, and that's the utmost thing that we look at is we try to look at, hey, what's the communities downstream from these areas? And like I said, we'd start mapping, and then we do a lot of hydrologic and soil modeling as well.
How badly was the Dose fire burned? I mean, what kind of burn would that be classified as?
The majority of that was actually at the moderate burn severity class. It moved so quick that it didn't really stay put in the one area, and it didn't allow the heat to really get into the soil. So we had some hydrophobicity, but it wasn't as bad as some other areas that we've seen.
So Dose was a runner. It ran across the ground.
It ran very fast, as people remember during the wildfire conditions.
Right, yeah. So with you going in now and you've studied the area, you've looked at it, you've tested the soils, how do you determine what needs to be done to try our best as people go to try to remedy some of the situation that's up there?
Well, there's a number of things that we do. You know, when we talk about this, we're looking at an emergency situation, but from land managers, we got to realize that fire is part of the ecosystem. That's just how it functions. But we try to look at the emergency, and we hone in on the emergency. And like I said, you know, human life, safety, and critical resources. So we try to look at the human life and property downstream and the critical resources. So that's where we hone in on where to do the treatments on these areas, where we think we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. So if we have a deep, very productive soil that we think we have a lot of water storage, these are the areas that we're going to try to treat. So there's a lot of methods. We want to try to get that ground cover back on. So that's why you hear about seeding quite a bit.
What about the areas that aren't so conducive to that, though? What if it is burned severely? What do you do then? And let's say we've got an area that's burned really severe. It's like glass now, and you've got a community down below. How do you deal with that area?
And that's a good point, Paul. We can't cure all the problems. You know, the fire's there. We can only do so much to mitigate it. You know, when you start getting to really steep slopes, we have a constraint. When you start getting into rocky areas, you know, that's not really conducive for seeding and mulching. So that's when we start looking downstream. We start trying to do some mitigation measures like jersey barriers.
What's a jersey barrier?
A jersey barrier is something you kind of see along the highway. It's a big concrete brick, essentially.
Okay, just to slow it down as it comes down.
Well, that's more of a hard measure right along somebody's property. And usually those are private lands, so the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, or the emergency flood control districts, they try to do something like that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to keep all that runoff and soil erosion. It's going to be accelerated, but we're trying to mitigate it to as much as possible and trying to keep it on the landscape itself.
Sure, sure. So what do we do in the Dose fire burn area? What have we done so far to kind of mitigate some of the problems? So
we identified the watersheds that we had a concern, both for natural resources and downstream resources. And then we tried to identify where we have those thick, productive soils where we can actually make a difference. We're not going to make much of a difference on a rock outcrop. Seeding that, because that's inherently, that's how it stabilizes itself through that. So the dose seed's kind of unique because we really strategically identified treatment areas within there that are fingers. So if you look, I think the whole fire is 6,500 acres. We only treated about 120, 150 acres. There was only a certain amount of soils that were conducive for treatment.
Those are the key spots.
Those are the key areas.
Wow, I'll be darned. So just that little bit, huh?
Yes.
All right, let's take our second break, okay? Dave Moore, soil scientist for the BEAR team, the Burned Area Emergency Response Team. He's also a member of the Prescott National Forest. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Having a fire escape plan is very important to keep your family safe and together in the event of a fire. When you awake to the sound of a smoke detector and smoke in your room, don't stand straight up. Carefully roll off your bed and stay low under the smoke. If your door is shut, feel the door with the back of your hand. Slowly open the door if no heat is felt. Always stay low until you get to the outside of your home. Always have two ways out of your house and a specified meeting place somewhere outside your home. Home escape plans should be drawn up and rehearsed on a regular basis. This could be the difference between life and death if caught in a fire.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your Northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Move over, AZ. Arizona's move over law requires you to move over or slow down when you drive past any vehicle pulled over with flashing lights. Any vehicle means emergency responders, roadside assistance, law enforcement, highway crews, even stranded motorists. Ignore the law and you could pay a fine. Remember, every vehicle, every time. Move over, AZ.
Sponsored by ADA in partnership with the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Welcome back to Countywide. Good to have you in the studio today. We've got a few more minutes left in the program, and I wanted to make sure I asked you this. Okay, we've talked about the Dose fire. We've gone up there and did some mitigation work to rehabilitate that area, hopefully, or at least slow the waters down during the monsoon season. And I asked you, okay, what else can we talk about on here? And I was wondering, do you guys ever go back and look at areas you've treated to see, okay, this worked, this process, this approach we took worked on this area? Have you gone back to look at any of the fires that you've gone to in the past?
Yes, I think the Gladiator is a perfect example. Again, that's a 16,000 acre fire.
Yeah, it was
We
massive.
honed in on the areas that we had the emergency concern.
Mm-hmm.
There was a slope where the fire originated that drained right into town, and we had some concerns about soil productivity there. And we treated that with the seed, and we mulched it, and it was a very successful treatment. So, and that was 55% slopes. We've got 6 inches of rain in 12 hours with that, and it held very well. So we were very pleased on that.
Now, will you go back to the Dose fire here in a year or two and take a look at that and see how things are coming along?
Oh, absolutely. That's part of the process. We're still in an emergency situation. We want to make sure that our treatments are mitigating it. Mm-hmm. So as long as we continue to have an emergency situation, we'll be monitoring the situation.
We've got about a minute left, but I know you helped out with the Yarnell Hill fire. I know it was on state land, so it wasn't Prescott National Forest land, but you helped with the Yarnell Hill fire. What's kind of the story there right now?
Well, we didn't directly assist them.
Okay.
The NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the Yavapai Flood Control, because we have some expertise, they did call us and they asked us for some advice, and we gave them to it. But the BEAR program is, the jurisdiction of the BEAR program is for Forest Service lands.
Okay.
So as of now, I think they're doing some hydromulching adjacent to some private lands with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the county is sponsoring that. But I don't really know how.
When do you go back and look at the Dose fire? 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, we tried to look at it post-monsoon. Okay. Luckily, the area that we were concerned about, the storms have been dodging that area.
They have?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what would be nice is we don't want those intense storms. We'd like to have a nice light rain. So it would be nice if we can get into the winter precipitation, and those are usually nice, light, and we usually have a great response on it.
Well, let's hope for the best there. Dave Moore, thank you so much for coming in.
Hey, thank you, Paul.
Appreciate your time. Appreciate your time. That's today's show. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We will talk to you again next time.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.